Let's bring in one of former President Trump's attorneys, Will Scharf. Will, thanks for joining us this morning. There's a lot I want to get to. One of the things I want to begin with, though, is what Aaron Katersky was just talking about, this pre-sentencing investigation. Is the president going to fully cooperate?
The president's going to cooperate with the pre-sentence investigation, and we're going to speedily appeal this unjust verdict. I think this case is replete with reversible error. We plan to vigorously defend President Trump's rights in the appellate courts all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary.
On Thursday, you praised the jury. You said that they were considering the law and the evidence seriously, and you predicted a just verdict. Do you accept their decision now?
No, I think when you look at the jury instructions here, Judge Merchan essentially, I wouldn't say rigged the deliberations, but certainly steered the jury towards the verdict that he clearly wanted. We're going to be challenging Judge Merchan's failure to recuse on appeal. I think it constitutes a clear due process violation. We're obviously going to be challenging aspects of the jury instructions themselves as well. I think there's a lot of appellate material there.
That's quite a change for you. Before the verdict came out, you said that the jury instructions are quite favorable to your side. So when you think they're going your way, the instructions are favorable. When the jury rules against you, the judge made a mistake?
I think hope for the best, plan for the worst, George. But I think when you look at the totality of the circumstances in this case, this is a prosecution that should have never been brought. This was a case tried in front of a judge who clearly should have recused. I think we have a lot of fair complaints with the way that this trial was conducted. And I think ultimately President Trump will be vindicated on appeal.
The ethics panel for the state of New York said the judge was not required to recuse.
Well, I think when you look at binding Supreme Court precedent, including most notably the seminal case on judicial recusal, Caperton v. Massey, even the appearance of impropriety can require a judge to recuse for reasons of due process. Here, I think we have far more than an appearance of impropriety. The fact that Judge Merchan contributed to Joe Biden during the 2020 election, many of the other issues that we've raised in our recusal papers throughout this case, I think Judge Merchan should have clearly recused, and I think that's going to be an issue that the appellate courts are going to have to deal with.
If appearance of impropriety is the standard for recusal, then why shouldn't Justice Thomas and Justice Alito have to recuse from the cases before the Supreme Court?
I think the appearance of impropriety there is not nearly as severe. I think you're not talking about financial conflicts of interest. You're certainly not talking about a judge who's violated judicial code of conduct in terms of political contributions. I think that's frankly stunning. Speaking as a former attorney, former law clerk, I've never heard of a judge contributing to political candidates before. I've certainly never heard of a judge sitting in judgment over the opponent of the political candidate he contributed to. I think the American people see through this sort of thing. I think that's why President Trump's poll numbers seem to be rising rather than falling. The Trump campaign obviously smashed political fundraising records, including raising money from tens of thousands of new donors in the 24 hours after this verdict. I think the American people see this judgment for what it was, and we're certainly hopeful that on appeal we can get it thrown out just because of how wildly unjust it is.
Again, the ethics panel had all the evidence that you had, and they decided that there was not a conflict there. But let's move on. There's several legal experts have criticized the way the Trump legal team handled this trial. Was it a mistake for the president not to testify?
I think in light of the Judge Merchan's decision about the scope of allowable cross-examination, which I believe was wildly wrong, I think it would have been dangerous for President Trump to take the stand. But I think had President Trump taken the stand, certainly on direct, he would have been a compelling witness. I continue to believe, as I believe most Americans believe, that President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong here, certainly nothing illegal, and certainly not rising to the level of this conviction. So I think that was a decision that was made in light of the way that Judge Merchan was handling these proceedings.
Absolutely nothing wrong. Well, 12 jurors said he clearly falsified the business records and did it to advance a conspiracy.
I believe that verdict is not supported by anything even close to proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And again, we're going to be vigorously challenging this verdict on appeal. We think we have ample grounds to. I think some of Judge Merchan's evidentiary decisions really throughout the conduct of this trial were frankly astounding. Not allowing Brad Smith to testify the way that he wanted. This is one of the world's leading experts on federal election law, severely limiting the scope of examination of Robert Costello, who I believe had absolutely damning information about the prosecution's case. On decision after decision after decision, Judge Merchan, I think, departed from normal courtroom procedure, normal courtroom practice to essentially stack the deck against President Trump. And again, these are all issues that we're going to raise on appeal. We're going to raise them vigorously, and we believe that we're going to win.
Another criticism that was been labeled against the Trump legal team was that it was a mistake not to acknowledge the relationship with Stormy Daniels. They say that put the president's defense up against a wall.
I think the truth needed to come through. I think that President Trump has consistently denied this affair. Stormy Daniels previously denied this affair. I don't think lying about what happened would have helped anything here. But again, I just completely disagree with the premise of that question.
The former president has called the judge a tyrant and a devil. Do you agree with that?
As I've said repeatedly during this interview, George, I think Judge Merchan should have clearly recused. I think he was irretrievably biased, and I think that came through in decisions throughout the conduct of this trial, whether it's evidentiary decisions. But again, I think the decision not to recuse in light of the severe appearance of impropriety, I believe actual conflict of interest between Judge Merchan and the defendant he was sitting in judgment over, it's head-scratching, to be honest, that he didn't step down off of this case.
Are you concerned that the continuing attacks on Judge Merchan and the attacks on witnesses like Michael Cohen is going to actually make sentencing worse for the former president?
I think it's really important to note that President Trump is running for president of the United States of America, and he has an absolute constitutional right to comment on matters of public importance. And unfortunately, this trial, which was, I believe, unjustly inserted into the presidential election cycle, is a matter of tremendous public importance. The weaponization of our legal system, the politicization of prosecution, these are all things that President Trump absolutely has to comment on. I think the fact that he labored under a gag order for as long as he did was manifestly unjust. So yes, absolutely, President Trump needs to be carrying his message to the American people, and I don't see how anyone can really poke holes at that.
You talked about the weaponization of the legal system. Of course, it was former President Trump who, throughout the 2016 campaign, led chants of "lock her up" about Hillary Clinton. But what do you expect from the sentencing process?
Well, but hold on a second, George. President Trump may have said that, but after he entered office, he certainly didn't weaponize the Department of Justice to pursue his political opponents the way that we've seen President Trump and his political allies act in the last couple of years. Remember, this case in New York, it was called the zombie case. It sat and sat and sat. It could have been brought at any point after 2020. And then suddenly, when President Trump announced his campaign for president, was dusted off, rushed in front of a grand jury, and then rushed into court. You want to talk about the politicization of the legal system? I mean, this is Exhibit A. It's absolutely unprecedented in American history. It's not the way that our campaigns are supposed to be run. We contest elections at the ballot box, not in the courts in this country.
That is true, but of course, we've never had a former president or a presidential candidate facing the kind of charges that the president faced because of his own activities. And of course, the Attorney General in Manhattan has nothing to do with the Department of Justice. Finally, what do you expect from the sentencing process?
I vehemently disagree that the district attorney in New York was not politically motivated here, and I vehemently disagree that President Biden and his political allies aren't up to their necks in this prosecution. I think the fact
there's
that
no
the Biden
evidence of that,
campaign
sir. There's no. I'm not going to let you continue to say that. There's just zero evidence of that.
Well, how about the fact that Matthew
is
Colangelo was standing over Alvin Bragg's shoulder when he announced this verdict? I mean, Colangelo was the #3 official in the Biden Department of Justice who suddenly disappears and shows up as an assistant district attorney right as Trump's case in New York starts to proceed.
After
you want to talk about
political
you want to talk about political coordination?
This has nothing
George,
to do.
Right
this has nothing to do. No, it's not. This has nothing to do with President Biden. Do you want to answer the question about the sentencing process or not?
I completely disagree that this has nothing to do with President Biden. With respect to sentencing, as I said before, we're going to vigorously challenge this case on appeal. I don't think President Trump is going to end up being subject to any sentence whatsoever, and we look forward to getting this case into the next court and taking this again all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary to vindicate President Trump's rights.
Thanks for your time this morning.
Appreciate it, George.